Bowling with the Fef.
I encourage you to get fat.
Your bowling stories.
All things the game of bowling.
Every week.
Helping bowlers.
The hand collapses down.
Live.
And I'm going to try to bowl the best I can.
2,000 subscribers. 2,000 subscribers.
I want to challenge Ken Nelson.
Tom Corbett.
Jason Belmonte.
Let's do this. This is Bowling with the Fef.
Yeah, let's do this on a Monday evening. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Bowling with the Fef, the platform for you to share your unique bowling story live on our YouTube channel. It's the Season 5 premiere, and I want to thank all the loyal viewers and listeners to this program for kind of keeping this thing going into the 5th season. If you hadn't noticed, I kind of do the seasons in tandem, I guess you could say, with bowling seasons. So we started the thing in October of 2020, which was pretty close to the start of that bowling season. And now here we are, not quite 4 years later. We're working on that. But thank you, all of you who support the channel. Always appreciated. Rocky Harrison, certainly a regular contributor, regular supporter. What's up, brother Fef? Rocky, I always appreciate seeing you in the chat. If you are like Rocky and watching live, feel free to utilize that live chat. And if you are watching on replay, hey, there's a comment window there. Please feel free to use it. I see all the comments and try to respond to as many as possible. He says league starts up tomorrow, getting his arsenal ready. Good luck to you and the rest of the league bowlers this season. Then you've got Bowling for Life 365, which is Connor Brown, one of our previous guests, says he changed his channel name because he's going to be posting some bowling videos on his channel. All right. That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that you're doing that, and I'll look forward to seeing it. You can count on it on one of your first subscribers being me, at least once I get off the stream here. Trey says, hello, Fef and JJ. Trey just making his way down to Wichita, Kansas. Hopefully you saw the interview that I did with Mr. Henriksmeyer about a couple weeks ago now, 3 weeks ago. He talked about kind of preparing for his next chapter of bowling at the Wichita State University on the selected team, and certainly a bright future for that young man in many different ways. Hey, a couple of different high-level events in Wisconsin over the weekend. Congratulations to Eugene McCune, knocking off Bill Fabian in the championship match at Sussex Bowl to win the PBA50 regional down there over the weekend. And then Nicole Coram Wilson taking the PWBA regional at Ashwaubenon Bowling Alley, which they call the Green Bay Regional. She defeated Carlene Beyer in that championship match. Would have liked to check out one or both of those, but had a family event to go to. But despite that, good to see lots of high-level bowling going on in our state. Well, the tour trials are in the books, and we have a dozen new exempt pros. Here they are. Hayden Stipich taking the top spot of those 12. Then you got Brandon Runk, Tim Foy Jr., Nate Purchase, who has been on the program before, Ryan Barnes, of course, the son of Chris and Linda Barnes, Kim Ballaby, Cam Crow, Bailey Maverick, Nathan Bohr, Andrew Hall, Chase Nato, and Chris Sloan, who you may have seen over the weekend, hit a big string in both games 47 and 48 to take that last spot, I believe, by about 9 sticks. So you had 90 bowlers bowling a total of 48 games in 4 different Chicagoland bowling centers on 4 different patterns. Then the top 12 that made the exempt qualifier list, they did that based on total pinfall. So certainly a grueling event, and big congratulations to those folks who will get to have the spots to be full-time touring pros without having to go to through those pre-tournament qualifiers that we hear so much about. So probably a sigh of relief for many, or certainly some excitement for them. But either way, a great accomplishment, and congratulations to all 12 of you. And now a word from our sponsor.
Raise your snack standards. Chip Magnet Salsa.
Yeah, Chip Magnet Salsa, a longtime supporter now of Bowling with the Feth and bowling in Western Wisconsin, and we're proud to have them on board. They're based in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, distributing to stores in more than 38 states and Canada. If they are in a store near you, go ahead and pick some up. But if they're not, try this website, chipmagnetsalsa.com. At checkout, you put in this promo code BWTF2024. You get 25% off your purchase of $30 or more, and there is no limit there. So feel free to go ahead and stock up, raise your snack standards with Chip Magnet Salsa. You know, with the football season coming up, what better time of year to have a fridge full of great tasting Chip Magnet Salsa. I highly recommend it. Rocky says, what's up, Trey? Good luck in Kansas. And Connor says basically the same. Good luck in Wichita State. Lucky to have you on their team. Go Shockers. And Rocky mentioned Sloan needed the last 5 strikes to make it, and he did. And it was amazing. If you see the video, he's playing way left, lofting it about halfway down the lane, and just crushing it, 10 back each time. And you could tell that he was pumped up about that, as well he should be. You know, that's a great accomplishment for him and the other 11 who are going on to exempt status in 2025. Well, our guest tonight ended episode 37 of Bowling with the Feth by saying he was going to bowl some local tournaments to, get ready for Team USA trials. But what he has done since then is absolutely remarkable. A USBC Senior Masters win, a total of 7 PBA50 wins in just 2 seasons. He has been honored with the 50s Rookie of the Year and Player of the Year honors in those 2 seasons. John Janawicz just back to Winter Haven, Florida, from Reno, Nevada, where he competed in the PANAM Bowling Championships, and as you would expect, he came home with several medals. John, welcome back to Bowling with the Feth, and welcome home. You've done quite a bit of traveling lately.
Yeah, it's been a lot of travel the last few months here, and it's actually kind of nice to be home. The bowling's been good lately. There's no complaints on my end, but at the same time, it's good to just come home and sleep in your own bed, and like I said, then be back to work tomorrow. So.
Yeah. well-deserved rest in your own bed, but it's no rest for the wicked. Obviously, you're right back to your job in lane maintenance as the Kegel Company. Let's talk about that Pan Am Bowling Championship, because I saw kind of bits and pieces. I know that you brought home medals. You were at the top of the heap in senior all events, where you posted an average of almost 227, out averaging the field by more than 11 pins. Can you give us kind of a quick synopsis of how that event went for you and why you were able to score so well there?
It started out okay. I had bronze medal in singles. Actually, I pretty collapsed the last game and shot 140 to kind of fall back into it. But then doubles didn't go over so well. Didn't quite see the picture right on the fresh again. Well, and it just I don't know, just one of those things. Just didn't really bowl too well. Didn't strike much, and just kind of knew I had to kind of there were some things I needed to change with some technique and strategy, and also combined with talking with a couple of my teammates, and also just watching some of the people that were bowling better. They seemed to be definitely slower, and were definitely a little bit farther inside. I don't think they were playing as far to the right as I think we were trying to play early. It seemed like as the week went on, the ball reaction right of 8 was just kind of gradually getting a little tougher and tougher to get some mistake area and strike. So just kind of between equipment and technique change, just going slower and slower and going farther left and curving it more on the fresh made it better. And then I kind of figured out the transition balls and what I needed to do, and the progression going from ball to ball to ball after that, kind of started to dial that in as we went along. And then, finished pretty strong between trios and team event.
Yeah. So. Tell us about the other members of that team and what the chemistry was like between you guys.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, as far as the male team, like I said, got to bowl with some of the guys I, compete against on the PBA50 Tour. Dan Knowlton, Steve Badavinik, and Tom Adcock. So, I mean, and they were absolutely fantastic to bowl with. Just really enjoyed it. They were great teammates, and just always keep trying from all the way to the very end. Even if their bowling wasn't that good at the particular time, communicated well as a team. Just kind of let what we're each other are trying to do, and all those guys, they're all three of them are really they're great bowlers to where they can just kind of watch and figure out what you need to do and translate that to your game. So, but it was fantastic to bowl with them. Hopefully, get a chance to bowl another zone championship or team event with them again in the near future.
Yeah. You talk about Reno, the National Bowling Stadium, a lot of high-level events there, both the Open Championships and other national things. What's that place like for you? I feel like a lot of people either love it or can't stand it, and doesn't seem to be too much in between. But how is it for you?
It's always been really good to me. I've always felt like that building was very good if your ball speed was a little bit on the softer side, and which kind of fits more into my skill set of what I can do better. So I think my balls always roll pretty good there. So, I mean, there are some people whose balls just definitely doesn't seem to roll well, but I know mine always has. And that place has always had good memories for me. It was, first place I went away for work to Oil Lanes for the Open Championship, and that back then it was the ABC National Championship in 1998. And first two Eagles came in that building. First time I made Team USA was in that building. So I mean, that place has a definitely pretty special. It's got a lot of good special memories for me personally.
Yeah, no doubt. You willing to accept the title that Rockies bestowed upon you, JJ the GOAT?
Not so sure about that, but it's been a good run lately. So I like you said, just gonna try to continue to get better. So more than anything.
For sure. Another aspect about Reno kind of came up during the week when I asked Steve Klemkin about you. He brought up Reno because he said he got to know you there. He's mentioned that 1998 ABC National Championships tourney when it was at the stadium, which was just 3 years old at the time. But he says he recalls you being the first good bowler that used the Robbie's Gladiator glove. He says, I don't think any other great scratch bowlers to this day have had success with that wrist support, but JJ sure did. So what was it about the Gladiator glove that, did well for you, and why did you decide to ditch it?
Yeah, I used it because for a while the late Pete Couture wore that all the time, and we were close friends. I bowled doubles with him and team with him at the Open Championships for many, many years. And at the time, I wasn't bowling very well. I just kind of a little bit of a physical slump and whatnot. Well, he was bowling, really good at the time. From 90, probably all the way from the early 90s, because he went on senior tour around the mid 90s as well. And 98, that was definitely that was probably peak time. On senior tour. And, I just decided to just try it, just out of anything, just out of, just kind of a, let's just see what happens. I can't bowl any worse. And it just happened to put my hand in a position to where I felt comfortable at the bottom of my release. And so I did wear it for, probably a few years or so, just to kind of, because it helped me bowl better at that time. And I got away with it. I got away from it probably around 99 or so, in that range. Just because the problem with when you're dealing with gloves that are that big, they also, while they kind of lock you into a release, which that ball roll can be good. At the same time, it does kind of lock you into that. So you don't really. I couldn't really throw the ball too many different ways while wearing that thing, and to kind of create the ball motion I needed to, I knew I was kind of limited. So I eventually, kind of weeded my way off of it over time. But yeah, that was the reason why I was wearing it. Cause also at that time I wasn't bowling much, around that 98 time. I was kind of focused on work, and working the Open Championships. So yeah, just kind of wore that for a couple of years there, prior to that. And then, I just kind of weeded my way off of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Being a fellow former wrist device user gone to not, I understand. I mean, yeah, it's harder to change wrist positions. And I used a pro release and I figured it kind of seemed like I spun it a little more than I wanted to. So by taking it off, I was better able to get under it. Okay, so PBA Tour trials are now over. You've got the 12 that I mentioned before, including the son of your tour roommate, Chris Barnes. How cool is that to see Ryan, hit this high at this point in the year and become an exempt pro for 2025?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely awesome. I mean, I know I'm sure there's a lot of great pride, for his dad too, as well. To be able to see your offspring, kind of follow in your footsteps, and start out, on tour and especially, being able to, be exempt when, the tour now is changing their format like this. Oh yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, I know he's worked really, really hard at the game over the last few years to continue to get better. And, obviously, I mean, you're learning from his parents. I mean, two of the best to ever, play the game in their respective, in bowling. So, I mean, but he's obviously put in a lot of hard work because, no matter how good your coaching may be, I mean, if you don't work at it in this game, it's still going to show. So, I mean, he's done a lot of hard work on his game. He's throwing it really, really well. And, like I said, it's, as long as he continues on that same learning curve and that pace and continue with his, that work ethic, he's definitely has all the, chances to follow and exceed, his dad's footsteps.
Yeah.
And those are pretty hard footsteps to follow there. I mean, definitely one of the all-time greats, PBA Hall of Famer.
Yeah. No, and what he's done in such a short amount of time has really been impressive to me. Now, one of the other things that has come out of this tour trials event is some of the pros and others kind of getting on social media and saying, look, there's no reason to bash people for how they throw the ball. Ryan's mother, Linda, was kind of one of them. Robert Smith put out a post about that. I didn't really see many of the posts criticizing the players. But what do you make of this? I mean, I feel like we're at kind of an advanced time in the game, and you've got a lot of two-handers out there and people throwing it different ways. And of course, I always mention it's not against the rules what you do behind the foul line, as long as you deliver a bowling ball with your digits in all the holes and knock them all down. And that's what guys, who have an unorthodox style have been able to do lately, at least unorthodox to those of us who, take 4 steps and bowl with a thumb, right?
Yeah. I mean, as long as it's legal and as long as the deliveries are legal, I mean, I don't see what the problem is. I mean, and I just think, as the game has kind of evolved to where, I mean, we're just not, we're not just playing the ball track anymore and moving one board over the course of 3 hours anymore like we used to. I mean, that as the game continues to evolve, well, styles are going to continue to evolve, and everything has, oil patterns, lane oils, bowling balls, lane surfaces. So, I mean, I just think it's just a byproduct of technology more than anything else. Whether people like it or not, you don't have to like it, but I mean, it comes right down to it. I mean, if you want to be good in 2024, these are probably, that's probably what you need to do, or at least the skills you need to learn, or figure out what you need to do in, within the biomechanics of your game to get from point A to point B. And some people don't like it. I mean, again, also some people don't work as hard as others either, and would rather just complain about it. So, like I said, I don't really worry too much about that kind of stuff. I mean, like I said, the great bowlers figure it out. In time, the great bowlers eventually have historically always figured it out.
For sure. You are somewhat famously not on a bowling ball staff. One of our viewers here, BSJ83, wanted to know any particular reason that you're a free agent, and would you ever consider joining a bowling ball staff?
I mean, I would consider it, but I mean, because of what I do for a living, I mean, being in lane maintenance and being and working for Kegel, I mean, I just really felt like it wasn't it could create a conflict of interest. And I've told a few people, I mean, there's already enough conspiracy theories about lane maintenance, and a lot of them aren't true to begin with. And I don't know, I think just the optic of a lane man being on a ball staff just doesn't look good, honestly, when it comes right down to it. So I just felt, that was a decision I made on my own, that, it's best that I would rather just remain neutral because of what I do for a living. Now, if I didn't work for Kegel, I didn't oil lanes, it's a whole different story. But because of, my long-standing history in the industry working with Kegel, with what with what people kind of know me for what I do, just felt like it would just be the best way to just kind of take the neutral route.
Sure. Yeah. CJ Layton says, JJ, good to see a Kegel man doing so well. Of course,
thank you.
He does the voiceover with the Phantom, Len Nicholson on Phantom Radio. Rocky Harrison says everyone is really a two-hander. We just drop a hand way earlier, and yeah, that's true. Unless you're Brianna Clemmer or Wayne Webb,
yeah,
right?
Yeah, Bob Learn. Yeah, I mean,
Bob
right. Yeah, there's a few, but yeah, for the most part, yeah, we usually start with two hands on the ball at some point in time. So
yeah, I certainly do. Okay, so at the end of the tour season, the 50 tour season, that is, PBA Commissioner Tom Clark posted a nice photo with you and Mika and Toby Contreras, Chris Barnes at dinner. And he said in the post that you can learn a lot about a lot by spending time with JJ, especially about winning. I also learned never to pass up pretzel rolls. So obviously, but I asked him, I said, can you elaborate on that? What that conversation was? He said, without giving away JJ's trade secrets, I'd say I learned about his astute observational skills. Is that anything you can tell us about?
I think you probably learned more about the pretzel rolls more than anything else from me than anything, But that was probably better advice than probably I gave him for anything else. But look, when it comes to bowling, I mean, I try to be very observant of what people do, and I pay pretty close attention to, especially the guys that have been on tour, have won multiple titles on tour and on senior tour, because there's a lot of things that you can learn from them, and just in how they handle adversity, how they adapt to the burn, how they adapt to the fresh, what they do with their equipment, how they prep their equipment, mentally, how do they, when things aren't going well, how do they handle that? I just try to be observant about, what makes people great more than anything. And I try to find ways that, to try to incorporate some of those things in my own game, and how I attack, a certain a certain lane condition or whatnot, because there's always, better ways to do things. And, we can all improve, in basically everything that we do. So, no, I can't remember everything that we talked about, but I remember there was some things about, being observant, and that's really what I've tried to do over these last couple of years. And it's been a great experience, to be able to, whenever you can bowl, next to, some of the legends in the game. I mean, that's why I always just try to, keep the eyes open and the mouth shut more than anything. And, just try to, soak in and observe, what has made them great over the years.
Yeah. That leads to the natural follow-up, which BSJ83 plopped up right away. Which bowlers did you look up to growing up?
Marshall Holman was definitely one of my favorites. I always enjoyed, he was always must-see TV, I thought, back in the day, because, he was he was very explosive, and I mean, also, I mean, he was definitely one of the guys that definitely hooked it back then. I mean, obviously I watched Mark Roth, that was definitely one of my idols. Also, Pete Weber was another one too. I mean, somebody that was so good at, playing the gutter, could, throw it slow, throw it hard, could hook the whole lane. I mean, I was always very, very in awe about his versatility. So those were definitely a few of the ones, probably the main three that, I was definitely, I always watched all the time, and, would always look for on TV when I was, tuned in on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, those are some great names. Absolutely. And, Holman, who came on the show, I had to mention that, one of my first memories was seeing him win the 86 TFC and, hoisting the trophy up. And yeah, he was electric on television without a doubt.
Yeah.
Okay. So the last time you came in, to be on the show, you were still 49, and, you turned 50, I want to say maybe a couple months later. And that came with what seemed like a very elaborate surprise. Tell us about how Deandra Asbeatty kind of lured you into this grand surprise party with like 100 people?
Yeah, there was close to 100 people, 90 or 100 people. And I wasn't expecting it at all. I mean, she had said that, she was going to be in town, with a friend, and her friend was going to be, hosting this party, and, asked me if I could, spend some time with her. And I was like, yeah, sure, of course. And I mean, I was planning actually on bowling a tournament that day, and she ended out, trying to make sure that I didn't bowl that, so it ended up working out in those regards. But I mean, we met her at the mall at Millennia, and she said she had to go pick up a package that was over near downtown for her friend, for her friend's party or whatnot. And she actually had me in a tuxedo because we were supposed to do dinner. And we were supposed to do dinner after we picked up the tuxedo. Well, we kind of tell which direction that went after that. But she managed to get me hook, line, and sinker to fall for that. And it was a great time. It was never expected it, especially because considering it was probably like a month and a half after my actual birthday. So I had that really, didn't think, it feels a little bit closer to September 6th. I probably might have, had some, different thoughts about that. But, being so far away, I didn't even think anything of it. I just thought, I'll get to spend some time with her. Because I usually only see her about maybe once or twice a year anyway, just in passing for tournaments or whatnot. So it was just, great to spend some time with her. And next thing you know, I ended up spending time with about another 89 people over the course of the next 3 hours. So it was just a fantastic day. Definitely one that I'll always remember for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and you got a great story to tell from it too, which is even better. Yeah. Okay, so the Senior Masters title kind of seems to be the start of this flurry of wins that you've had. When you were in the midst of it, did that championship, do something to really kind of put you in the right mode to, to be successful, to have the confidence, to kind of get all those things fit into place to make this run that you're on?
I mean, I've always felt like I had the ability to win. I mean, but like I've said a couple times, I mean, to win though on tour, I mean, especially when you're dealing with, step ladder formats and whatnot, I mean, you have to bowl well, you got to make some good decisions, but, you still have to have some things go your way too. I mean, if your opponent shoots 300 or 279, 300 at you, I mean, there's not a whole lot you can do. I mean, it happened earlier, this past year, I was trying to defend the title for the Senior Masters, and, Mike Bailey shot 275 at me. I mean, you just, sometimes, your opponents are going to bowl really, really well. And, you have to accept that. But, it was, to be able to get the win, right away, definitely, helped. It was definitely a good confidence booster. And, it's always nice to be able to, to win your first time, your first event out there. And, definitely helps loosen the swing up more than anything else, and made it a lot easier for the rest of the course of that year. I mean, especially if you look at it also like from a financial standpoint, I mean, when even though you feel like you can win, still, I mean, you're pretty invested in bowling the whole tour, and you're dealing with a lot of entry fees over the course of 12, 14, 16 events, and a lot of expenses. But it's nice to be able to pretty much pay for most of it in the first week that you're out there. But yeah, like I said, that did help. Help for the from the run that I've kind of been on now, no doubt, though.
Yeah. Despite that, you're still a rookie. You haven't bowled these events yet until you did that first year. What was that like for you?
It was a good learning experience. I mean, also because a lot of the formats are very different on tour compared to what I see locally, and even like in regionals a lot of times. I mean, like there, a fair amount of the events there's no re-oils, so we're bowling on burn, and sometimes double burn for some of the events. So I mean, there's you have to utilize some skill sets that you don't always normally have to do in local tournaments, and also bowling with the seniors. Their breakdowns a little different, compared to bowling against some of the kids here locally. Even though it's we're only bowling a lot of times 5 and 6 game sweepers, and we might only have 3 to 4 in a pair, but the kind of breakdown's different. So the equipment and the skill sets you need tend to be a little different, at least for me, bowling with the kids compared to the seniors. So there was some of that learning curve as well too, of how to handle the senior cliff wet dry as opposed to what the kids do locally here. So there were some equipment things I learned from that, and also caused me to, experiment a little bit more when I was at home, trying different layouts and different types of balls and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it was a really good experience overall, and it was a lot of fun, traveling, the U.S. as well too, and doing something that I always wanted to do since I was a little kid was, basically bowl on tour.
Yeah, for sure. BSJ83 says, of course, you like to post photos on social media of different restaurants that you visit. What is your favorite food to eat?
I don't ever have a favorite food, but I would say seafood is by far the favorite category. I tell people all the time. I mean, seafood 1 and Chinese 2. Those are probably my favorite 2 groups that I could eat that every day. But yeah, when it comes to seafood, fish, shrimp, lobster, crab, mussels, oysters. Yeah, I have no problem eating that on a daily basis. Same thing like with sushi and whatnot. Yeah, I can eat that daily. But yeah, I could probably eat sushi every day also as well. I have no problem. I like raw fish, and whether it be or tempura, however, sashimi or sushi, whichever way.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're hitting all the high points for me too, but obviously we can't, go out and eat sushi and Chinese and all that stuff every day. Tell us a little about, kind of what you do as far as lifestyle, both on the tour and off the lanes, when it comes to things like diet and exercise. I mean, you've got to stay, the best version of yourself to bowl all these games week after week, the grind of the travel, etc. And I would think that, your lifestyle choices kind of help you do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably about as out of shape right now as I've been in a long time. So tomorrow morning I'm going to be starting the slow program to fixing that. But yeah, I mean, I've got a Planet Fitness membership because I knew I needed some kind of gym membership when I was on the road, because I've got a local gym here, Just Move, which is they got 3 clubs here within Winter Haven, and 4 clubs, Winter Haven and Lakeland. And they originally started out as Gold's Gym, but the proprietor had decided to go private because he just felt like the amount of money he was spending on franchise fees, he could just sink into the club, and they're great clubs. But I had originally gotten to those Gold Gym membership because you could use the travel pass. Well, now since he went private with it, years ago, I couldn't. I'd have to find something else, and it just seemed like when it came to the fitness, a lot of the national fitness chains, it seemed like the ones that I would see everywhere were either Anytime Fitness or Planet Fitness, and I kind of did a little bit of research on both, and felt like Planet Fitness was probably the better fit for me. And so I got a membership, and yeah, I try to look for, and try to utilize those all the time, when I'm on the road. Like anything, depending on where you stay, and, sometimes it's not the most convenient to get there. But, like in Jackson, Michigan, I mean, I think when we were there for the World Series, I used it, I think, like 9 days out of the 10, but then like in Jonesboro, I think I used that plan. I don't think I went once because it was far enough away, and just the way the schedule worked out, and had some other issues there too, to where didn't really work out for me. And then like, Hammond, Indiana, I went twice, over the 5 days, 4 or 5 days that we were there. So I try to go as much as I can, and more than anything on the road, not really to, do anything, any real hard lifting, but more anything stretching, and just try to do, a lot of pull-ups and a lot of abdominal work, because I've had back problems for years. So, I mean, if anything, to try to, keep the abs strong and the oblique strong to help support my back more than anything. That's usually what I just try to focus on that while I'm on the road. And then, when I'm at home, since most of the time I don't have a, real rigid bowling schedule when I'm at home, I'm mostly just doing weekend stuff, and, practice a couple times during the week. So, I mean, if I go a little hard during the week and, I get too sore, if I take a day or two off, it's not the end of the world, but, which I'll be definitely hitting it a lot harder now over these next few weeks before I leave for Thailand in 3 weeks. But yeah, that's really what I just try to do more than anything on the road is, try to at least, go a few times a week, and try not to go any more than about 4 days without working out if possible.
Sure. We have a giant in both the competitive side of this sport and the content creation side. Darren Tang, who's your favorite Team USA doubles partner?
It's obviously D Tang. I mean, yeah, he was awesome. We got to bowl doubles with each other. I think it was in PANAMs in Peru, a couple of years back. And I was hoping we'd get the chance again, but I didn't try for Team USA this past year, and there wasn't any over/under doubles medals at the PANAMs in Reno, so we didn't get that chance. But yeah, absolutely, he's an awesome guy. Great to bowl with, and like I said, it's definitely one of the really great members of Team USA, and hopefully will be for many, many years to come.
Yeah, fantastic physical game, and of course, the content creation side. His channel is that's everything I strive to be. So go check it out.
He's got a good thing going there. That's for sure.
Yeah, he does. BSJ83 wants to know, will you try out for Team USA in 25?
I'm going to say probably not, only because, and it's not because I don't feel like I physically or bowling ability can't make it, but I'm just going to see how things go because Kegel's been great enough to allow me to bowl the senior tour these last 2 years, and if they do allow me to do it again, Team USA takes a fair amount of time. I mean, you're there a week for trials, and if you make it, you're there for a week for team camp, and then they give you the green light to bowl the Masters, which I feel like I should bowl the USBC Masters. So there's another week right there, and if you bowl the Pan Ams or the World Championships or one of those events, that's usually going to be like another week. So I mean, it's usually a pretty solid month-long commitment. If you go to, if you try for Team USA, and when the company gives you, when they gave me, literally 3 months to bowl a senior tour, I have a hard time just, sticking them for another month on top of that. So I will say probably not. Unless something changes otherwise. But I definitely will leave that door open, to maybe bowl again in the future. Some of my best experiences in bowling were, with the 10 times, that I made Team USA, and, some of the people you meet, and, some of the, the places you get to see overseas. They're just, absolutely fantastic. So, like I said, at some point in time, I probably will, bowl trials again, but, probably as of right now, I don't plan to for next year.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned, that Kegel has been supportive of you basically living out a dream of, competing against the Legends, the Legends Tour. I guess, what do you remember about that moment, if there was one moment that, somebody with the Kegel brass says, yes, here's the time you need. We support you. Go out and, win them all on the 50.
Yeah. Yeah. Chris Chartrand, our CEO, was the one who we had that conversation. I want to say it was back like in December of 2002. And he's like, we know that, you just turned 50, and, we would like you to, we would fully support you to bowl the senior tour. They know that's something I've always done, but, I decided to take the route of lane maintenance and, decided to, not go that route. And, they were completely supportive for me, doing this. And, I'll always be forever grateful for him and, and Kegel to, allow me to and give me the time to be able to, live out this dream. And, but yeah, like I said, it did change the kind of the course, because otherwise I was just planning on just using my, my vacation time to maybe just bowl the Senior Masters, probably the Senior US Open. And then, the rest of it would be, probably the Open Championships, a few vacation days here and there. And they've supported me with Team USA in the past. So, I mean, I probably might have continued to bowl, trials. And, if I made it, they always worked with me when it came to, to meet their obligations. But no, I probably never would have gotten a PBA card if they, if they didn't allow me the freedom to be able to bowl the whole tour. So, yes, I mean, I'll always be forever grateful for them.
Yeah. I got to ask, is it kind of a double-edged sword working in lane maintenance? And the reason I'm asking this is because I, put in a text to Dana Wright, who famously was the one that Pete Weber was yelling at one of his most recent 50 tournaments not too long ago. And Dana competed in some of the 50 events. He recently announced that he's not going to do that anymore. But when I asked him, why does JJ win so much? He said, my personal opinion is why John wins so much is he's the creator of the patterns. He's the first one to see these patterns. He takes his notes, and then he already has more knowledge than anybody that's going to be bowling. You got to be able to throw the ball, but my personal opinion is that's a big advantage over everybody else. Now, it's kind of coincidental because I talked to Steve Klemkin after I talked to Dana Wright, and Steve said that you were one of the first to tell him that one of the biggest things that you've learned after running lanes now all over the world is how little the oil pattern matters. The center, in terms of surface and topography and wear and tear, etc., all matters more than the tweaks and adjustments to the lane conditions. He said, I don't think many people know that. Well, I did ask him, about that. Don't the centers play differently? And he admitted, he even talked about a Bolero center in the Twin Cities that no matter what pattern you put on it, it just seems like it just hooks and hooks and hooks. But he still he still believes that you have these patterns, you have the ability to bowl on these patterns, and you have comprehension on what's going to happen when these patterns break down. Now, he went on to say, don't get him wrong, you're a great bowler. You're one of the elite bowlers in the US. But when you have an advantage over somebody else, it kind of sucks from the rest of us. He said, unfortunately, we don't get to see, what you're doing. And he said he'd like to see it because he would like that information. And could that be public to the rest of them? What do you think about all that?
Well, I might know what the oil pattern is, but if we get down to the Senior Masters and I'm bowling Parker, does me knowing the pattern really that much of an advantage over at that point in time? After 10 minutes of practice, if I'm bowling the regular Masters and I'm bowling Belmo, does me knowing a pattern, is that really an advantage over Belmo? No, my opinion, no. You still got to throw it. Now, that being said, my career has been spent, obviously in pattern design, and, it started at the Open Championship. And then, once I came to work for Kegel, we were in charge of lane maintenance for the PBA from 97 to 2003. So, and I was part of that crew that did lanes for Senior Tour and Regular Tour. So, I mean, when I like to think for someone that's a bowler like myself, and you look at a pattern, you know what the lane surface is, and in some cases you know what the topography is of the surface, and then you watch some of the best bowlers in the world attack it. Then you kind of see what works and what doesn't. And then you do that week after week, month after month, year after year for your career. You like to think that you see a few trends of what kind of works and what doesn't. So, I mean, and I'd like to think that I has taken some of the, what you've observed for, okay, let's translate to myself for what do I need to do for my game to try to get good ball motion based on kind of what I know. And I think that's really, if there's any advantage, I think if anything, I might have a little better game plan of how to attack the practice session more than anything else. And I'll probably get lined up a little faster than most of those guys, which out there, that's a huge advantage. I mean, because, you got a whole bunch of guys out there that, once they get lined up, they'll shoot, 240, 250, 260, like it's nothing. But, what happens when the lanes transition? That's, the guy who sees it first, the guy who gets lined back up the fastest is usually the guy that's going to win. It's not necessarily, the guy who's, repeating the best, but, it's the one who can adapt to the change. And, also, going to what, Steve said, we see it here in Florida. I mean, there are some bowling centers that no matter what you do, it's never going to play good to the right of 7. I mean, no matter what. So, I mean, is that really pattern? It can't be pattern. It's all lane surface. So, like I said, that's where, if you know certain things about, the age of a lane surface, the front of the lane is going to be beat up, the ball track's going to be beat up, and that the front panel is going to be pretty much dished pretty much from all of the, all the pounding of the balls at, from the head area over, 15, 20, 25, 30 years. I mean, that the surface is going to be dominant, and, no matter what you do oil pattern wise, it's not going to, it's really not going to have that much of effect, especially depending on the distance that you use. I mean, there are just some, start play. So, I mean, if anything, I'm just not going to, I'm not going to start there. I'm not going to play percentage wise in a part of the lane that historically shows that it's probably not going to be very good, especially if you've been to the center multiple times and you've seen, these trends. And, because I mean, a lot of the PBA goes to, a fair amount of the same centers all the time. And, same thing even in competitive bowling, whether it be, women's competitive bowling or Team USA or the PBA. I mean, there's been more than enough tournaments at the South Point Plaza, the bowling stadium in Reno, and, and like locally around here, Boardwalk Bowl and Langlo, Langlo Bowl in Newport Richie. There's certain centers that, they host just a lot of tournaments, scratch tournaments. And, you see certain trends out of those particular bowling centers. So, do I think it's an advantage? I mean, I just think, to say that knowing a pattern is an advantage over EJ or Belmo to me I find that kind of laughable, but is an advantage maybe to try to get lined up a little bit faster? Yeah, could be. Yeah, definitely could be.
The event that's always interesting to me is the Players Championship, because you guys go from really old surface to really new surface, right? In Bud Moore or Mr. Moore's basement.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So I mean, that was we went from I think like 31-year-old Anvil lane, or in that particular bowling center, to basically like about a 3-year-old pro lane, or I think maybe a 4 or 5-year-old pro lane in Bill's house, which doesn't it's not obviously not a commercial bowling center. So I mean, it's basically just like brand new. So I mean, you're definitely it's complete apples to oranges kind of comparison there. So I mean, you just literally have to just reset when you go to a place like that, and okay, well, what does the lane give me, and how quick can we adapt to what we have?
Yeah,
so
for sure. BSJ83 says, during his trophy presentation, you give credit to your Lord and Savior. Would like to hear your story on how and when you discovered Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, that that was in January of 1987. My parents gave their lives to Christ probably within the year prior to, and they watched a lot of the Jimmy Swaggart televangelism. Back in the day, a lot of his telecasts, and I just remember I was watching. They had it. They were watching it. Religiously. On a week to week basis there in like 80 throughout 86, and I just remember I was watching one of one of his services, and I just remember it just seemed like whatever that I couldn't remember exactly what he was talking about at that time, but like I felt like he was literally just talking right to me, and I just felt like it was God talking right to me. And I remember I gave my life to Christ at that point, and ever since then, I've just tried to do the best I can to live for the Lord, and and I have no regrets about that at all either, and because frankly, I mean, I look back at, how I was then. And, like anything, we're never going to be perfect people, but at the same time, I've never used that as an excuse to stop trying, so I'm just going to try to continue to, try to be a better person each day. And, you try to be a little bit smarter with, the things that you say and, and the things that you think about, and try to, it seemed like, a lot of things that come out of your mouth started with things that you started up here. So, you try to, cut some of those things off up here before it kind of, gradually filters out of your mouth. And, but yeah, just try to, just try to be a little bit better each day, keep trying to serve him the best I can, each day. And, yeah, I definitely wouldn't have any problem, talking to people about it, but like anything, it's kind of a sensitive subject, because I mean, some people are definitely, they don't like it being pounded down their throat, and that's perfectly fine. But I can just say for myself, though, I mean, since I gave my life to Christ, if I found out after I died that it was just a big joke and we could do this all over again and live however we wanted, I wouldn't change anything about how I've lived the last 35 40 years here, so 40 plus years. So I mean, like I said, I'm just going to try to do the best I can to keep doing the Lord's work. And like anything, we all make mistakes, and that's where, like anything, I try not to be very critical about what other people do, because I mean, in the end, Christ died for all of us. So just try to do the best you can, and try to help people out, and be kind, and try to be that person that others that you would like others to be for you more than anything, and just show love.
Yeah. Yeah. Good advice. Derek Michaud in the house says, "Hey guys." Hey Derek. He's the creator of Flush in the Pocket, which is another great bowling podcast, live stream, whatever you want to name it there. Okay. So, we talk about history in terms of title wins and things like that. And when I think of you, I think of a guy kind of like Tom Hess, where, you either didn't win on the PBA Tour or didn't win a lot, and all of a sudden you're rolling him over in on the 50 Tour. So I asked Jeff Riggles about, maybe some comps. Was there ever senior tour dominance where you've got multiple players that maybe didn't win or didn't win a lot on the regular tour coming in and really dominated? And the names that he brought up were John Hersina. His last title was in 95. John Handegard, last title in 98. Gene Stuss, his last title in 2002, and Bob Glass with 9 championships, and his last in 05. And Jeff mentioned that, that because of the proximity in years, there's clearly some overlap in there, but he's not sure if any of them had any intense dominance over a short period, like we're seeing now. Is that kind of thing something that you think about? Is it special that not only are you doing this, but Tom Hess is kind of, along that similar track where maybe you didn't have the opportunity or didn't, whatever reason, didn't win a lot on the PBA Tour, but are now, I mean, as far as titles are concerned, you're Hall of Fame eligible already.
Yeah, I mean, it like in the case of Tom, I mean, he'd been on tour for a long time, and I can't speak for him, but I mean, like, I just know for myself, though, I mean, we all kind of peak at different times, in our life. And, I know for myself, I feel like I've continued to get better, and that I just, you just keep trying to learn and get better at what you do. And, not just physically, but, also mentally. And, you try to, from a knowledge standpoint, try to just be smarter, more than anything else. How can I see, how can I get lined up faster? How can I, see transition before it happens? How can I be better at spare shooting? How can, from a mental standpoint, how can I not let this bother me, like it did last time, or, like it did a couple of years ago, and I think like anything, we all peak at different times. And as far as I'm concerned, Tom's continued to get better and better as well, over the years, just watching him, and being on tour, it's not easy to win out there. Like I said, I never went on national tour and, tried to do it. I only probably, if you take the Masters and the, and the US Open out of play, I probably only bowled maybe 1 or 2 stops in my whole life, regular tour stops. So, it's quite the grind out there. And, like I said, I just think that, since we, some people do peak at different times, I think, fortunately for me, I think that, the timing was right for me to go on senior tour and get my card, obviously, and I still feel like right now I'm way better than I was 5 years ago and 10 years ago, even though, maybe my rev rate might not be as high as it was maybe 10 years ago. What I've made up for, in mental game and knowledge and all those other intangibles that, what makes up, great bowlers. I feel like that's more than trumped, what I might have lost maybe in a little bit of rev rate.
Sure. Yeah. I did ask him, what in your physical game stands out to him. He said the oddity of your varied hesitation step is fascinating, but the strength of your release at 50 plus is astounding. He believes that's a separator for Hess too. Do you think that's kind of the secret sauce, or is it just one little thing and a bunch of different things that kind of makes who JJ is on the lanes?
Yeah, the release does help. Obviously, I think Hess's release is fantastic. And he's such a strong guy too. He just makes it so effortless. I think that's what amazes me about Tom is that, like, he just literally just looks like he's just kind of going through motions, and his ball just comes revving off his hand. He's got great ball roll. So I think he's got one of the best ball rolls on tour by far. And some people think my ball roll is pretty good, which I appreciate that. It does seem like it's been, it definitely hasn't hurt me. It hasn't been bad ball roll, but like anything, you think that the other intangibles, being able to change ball speed and take a little bit off the ball or put more on it as needed, to be able to adapt to whatever you have out there. That to me, I think that's probably, it's those things I think that, kind of help, have really helped me out on the senior tour. And as far as the hesitation step, that's something that's just kind of really evolved more in the last year or so. That never used to be there. It's just, it just kind of helps me, if anything, control my ball speed more than anything. So usually the bigger the hesitation step, the slower I'll throw it, or the slower I'm trying to throw it more than anything. So, it's probably something I'll probably work on a little bit more in the off season, but yeah, it's just kind of something that evolved. And also just for what, with that hesitation and the combination of my push away and how high or how far out I tend to push it. Also, it affects my timing. And I kind of also use that as like a timing guide to help get me, better in time more than anything else. I think if anything, I tend to get a little early with my timing, where I tend to just drop the ball into the swing and I get a little lazy and I drop it in the swing a little too fast. And I think that also helps me kind of focus on making sure that I, create a little bit of space for that ball to drop through the slot more than anything, instead of me, trying to drop it in really quick. And then, you have to kind of get your body out of the way of it more than anything else.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, we got a few comments here. Irish Pogie says hello. He says he thinks you are the modern day John Handegard, who he recalls won 2 titles in 90, 3 titles in 91, 1 title in 92, 2 titles in 93. I remember those days, seeing him on ESPN on the Senior Tour just all the time. Do you like that comp?
I mean, I appreciate the comparison, but yeah, John was pretty awesome. I mean, yeah, I mean, he won a national title at 57, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I mean, a regular event. So, I mean, I probably don't see that happening with me anytime in the next 5 years. But I mean, for him to do that was pretty amazing. And at the same time, I mean, during that time, and I can't remember the exact time window, but I mean, to win those titles while I think Earl was still bowling a few of those events. I mean, it's not easy to do. So there were some pretty good ones out there also back then in that day too. So yeah, I appreciate the comment, but yeah, I don't know. We'll just see what happens over the next few years and where I go from there. But yeah, I mean, Handegard by far was definitely one of the best, and definitely Hall well deserved Hall of Famer by far.
Yeah, great ball roll always.
Mm-hmm.
Brent Prentice says he crossed off and finished his bowler bucket list when he met you in the elevator in Reno. That was when he was awarded Proprietor of the Year. You remember that elevator ride?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I did meet him there, and hopefully I'll get to go to his center at some point in time. I know that's definitely one of the highest regarded PWBA stops at his center. So yeah, it was great to meet him. So, and like I said, hopefully I'll get to go to his center at some point in time, and maybe meet him again in another elevator at some point in time. Maybe for a convention or Hall of Fame again. So yeah, really good guy. Really good guy.
Yeah. Mark London says JJ's release he saw last summer defeated drier heads and mid lanes, granting optimum entry angle and sneaky good hitting power. Sneaky good?
I don't know about that. Hitting power might have a little bit to do maybe with throwing 16 pounds maybe, but yeah, as far as entry angle, I mean, I've got my ball rotation. It's probably a little more than 45 degrees. It's probably a little closer to 55. So I mean, that might help with the entry angle part. I mean, it's also not really the best for wet dry either. So I mean, there's kind of a little bit of a I got to find other ways to try to get around that when we get to those squads. The burn and double burn squads on the senior tour. But yeah, it's I like to think I don't have too much of an issue with the heads, but more than anything else, I'll throw it over the front if I have to, to try to maintain angles. So, but yeah, so far it's the ball roll's been working. So I don't have any plans on really changing it anytime soon unless I have to physically. So.
Sure. So you mentioned the trip to Thailand. You mentioned probably not on Team USA 2025. So where do you go from here? I believe it's, I said you're title eligible for the PBA Hall of Fame, but you got to have the years, which I believe is 8 more on the PBA 50. Is that something that's a goal of yours?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I've been told. Like anything, I plan to bowl as much as I can, and obviously being also a senior, I mean, you just kind of never know from a health standpoint what's going to happen, 8 years from now. So, but like I said, God willing, good health. Depending on what my job, with Kegel happens, I'll try to bowl as many of these events, and even if it's not full tour, I will still plan to bowl like the World Series and the majors and things like that. Still use my vacation time for that. But yeah, I have no intentions of dropping my PBA membership anytime soon. And yeah, I mean, to be able to enshrined in the PBA Hall of Fame would be, obviously that's the ultimate, in bowling, and especially already being in the USBC Hall. I mean, to me, those are, you couldn't ask, those are the 2 premier halls of fame in bowling. So yeah, it would be absolute dream come true, but like anything, just because you're eligible doesn't mean you're going to get in, so, but it's nice, if anything, just to know that, at least you've met the performance criteria, from that aspect. But, I'd still like to, to win a few more. I'd love to get to 10 titles, if anything. and then go from there. But like anything, we'll see what the future holds. But the immediate future, I got to go back to work in the morning, so that'll be that's priority number one. So.
Yeah. And that being the case, since we're already over an hour, let me hit you with this.
Let's go off the sheet. Challenge a bowler to appear on a future episode.
I would like to challenge Will Madison.
I would say Diana Zavulova.
The better Russo, Lauren Russo.
We're looking for anyone who has a passion for the sport and a unique story to tell.
The last time you came on, you challenged Tom Hankey Jr. to come on, and what a great kid. I mean, he has such a great story, and the passion was there. He put out this really neat bowling background with a set of pins. So I'm excited to ask you again, JJ, who you'd like to challenge to be on a future episode of Bowling with the Fat?
Well, since I'm kind of in the lane man mode here, probably my fellow coworker, Christos Sergeevas, or otherwise known as, Christos. He's actually in Sweden right now, taking care of lanes for the Storm Lucky Larson Championship right now. So I would say probably, he'd be a pretty good story to tell too. Also, coming here, bowling for Weber, and now, working for Kegel now for, quite a few years now, getting involved in lane maintenance. I think he'd have a pretty good story to tell as well.
Okay. And am I right on with this? He's Verity's significant other?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. And
yep.
She's been on twice, so hopefully she can pass along the good word. But if you see this and interested in taking John up on his challenge, just reach out. I'm on Facebook, or you can email me at bowlingwiththefef@yahoo.com, and we'll go from there. JJ, it has been a pleasure once again. Continued success to you, both in the lane maintenance realm and in the competitive realm. We will certainly be watching.
Yep. Thanks again for having me on the show, Andrew. Really appreciate it.
You betcha. Thank you. And thanks to all of you who are watching. We will see you again next time.
Thank you for watching Bowling with the Fef. Pound the like button and subscribe button. It's the easiest way to support the channel, and it's free. Bowling with the Fef is brought to you by Chip Magnet. Raise your snack standards. Email bowlingwiththefef@yahoo.com with questions or to appear on the show. You can also reach out on your favorite social media platform.